The Reds never stop doing what we said. We said the Pioneers see the run of the greats in history. The Reds go marching on to victory.
Well, I hope everybody was at the game on Saturday evening at BMO Field. That was another draw, a 2-all draw between Toronto FC and the Chicago Fire. Has dried out. I checked out my scarf this morning and it's still damp from last night, and thank God I had a poncho. It was another miserable evening, in the weather at least, by the lake. Trying to think of what I was going to call this blog today, and I think I came up with the term pain in the rain. Last night was a painful result in a lot of ways for Toronto FC. It was a win, 3 precious points that were snatched away in the last 15 minutes again, and that was a trend, unfortunately, that TFC really hasn't had a difficulty with this season in the few games where they've actually won or drawn. Usually it's been taken care of relatively early. In previous seasons, there were a lot of collapses in the last 15 minutes, and yesterday, unfortunately, saw a recurrence of that trend. Man of the match, of course, João Plata, a lovely goal in the first half. Just another beautiful individual effort on his part. And, of course, he also, once again, set up the second goal for Maicon Santos, which again, I don't want to really give Maicon too much credit on this. It was a pretty straightforward ball on net that John Conway, in the wet rain last night, absolutely flubbed. Ball went right through his legs, and TFC is up 2-0. It was a great ball from Plata to Maicon to set the goal up, and Maicon, to his credit, got the ball on net, but it wasn't really an amazing goal. The Plata thing, I mentioned it last blog as well. He's actually been in on 7 of the last Toronto FC goals. He was actually officially credited with an assist last night, and of course the goal, he was subbed off in the 61st minute as man of the match, and rightly so. I think the referee had a decent game by MLS standards as well. Not a perfect result, not the best result at all. I think the card that he gave to Julian de Guzman was a little harsh yesterday, and that's going to come back to bite TFC in the ass in Colorado this upcoming weekend. Because Julian de Guzman has now picked up 5 yellow cards, some of them under very dubious circumstances, and that essentially means right now that he's not going to be available in Colorado. He's going to be available in Vancouver on Wednesday for what is arguably the most important game of TFC's early season on Wednesday evening, and I'll get to that a little later. 7th place is where TFC finds itself this morning, with 6 teams ahead of them. One of the big concerns for me is looking at the table for the Eastern Conference. TFC, coincidentally along with Vancouver, have played 1 more game at this point in their MLS season than everybody else. And there's a lot of teams still above them that have a lot of games in hand. So dropping points in the way that they dropped points last night is becoming a considerable concern if this team has any serious hopes of being there at the end of the season for the MLS playoffs. Now, as I said early on, Maicon's goal was a bit of a fluke. So 2 goals for Toronto, I think, is a little flattering in the run of things when it comes to the score. Chicago scored 1 goal off an amazing free kick. Again, another concern, a set-piece goal given up by the Reds, and then a kind of a scrappy goal late in the game to tie it up. Frankly, the 1 point, let alone the 3 points, the 1 point, the draw, was actually saved once again by Player of the Year candidate and MLS All-Star candidate, even though he's given up a lot of goals. Stephen Fry is just an amazing shot stopper, and he made a wonder save in like the 86th minute, I think it was, to keep the game at 2-all. Now, you can look at that game, I think, in 2 ways. You can say, okay, TFC took their foot off the gas. Excuse me, coffee. Oh, thank you. TFC took their foot off the gas, or they ran out of legs. The goals came in the first half. The goals conceded came in the second. And I think it's more of a fact due to the team really didn't have any legs. They looked sluggish in the second half in comparison to the first half. And I think it's got to do with the fact that there hasn't been as much squad rotation, probably that a lot of fans would have actually thought there would have been, considering the congestion of fixtures and the fact that the team is playing basically twice a week, every 3-4 days, for like a 5 or 6 week stretch between now and between early May and coming up into the first week of June. It's a really, really tough slog. Now they got to get on an airplane. They got to fly to Vancouver, and they've got to play a critical game in the CONCACAF Champions League, actually in the Canadian Championship, I should say, for qualification into the Champions League on Wednesday evening against Vancouver, a team that smoked them 4-2 early on in the season. I think it's got to do with the squad rotation more than anything else. The team just didn't look like it had any legs at all in the last 20-30 minutes, particularly of that match. And coincidentally, the two Chicago goals, the set piece and that scrappy goal late, and that play that led to the wonder save that kept the game at 2-2 and gave TFC something from the game, came in the last 15 minutes. There has to be more squad rotation if Toronto is able to get itself through some of these tough periods that are going to be on their plate over the next few days. So Vancouver away, as I said off the top, this is going to be arguably the most important game for Toronto FC so far this season. I think realistically, again, it's way too early to say, considering the TFC, looking at the schedule this morning in the paper and looking at the table, they are only still 5 points out of first place in the East. Yes, there's games in hand, but anything can happen. They can go on a 3 or 4 game winning streak and be right back into playoff contention. So it's way too early to write them off when it comes to playoff contention yet. But there's still 6 teams above them in the Eastern Conference, and there's I think 4 teams above them in the Western Conference as well, on points that are even outside of the top 3 that automatically qualify for the playoffs this year. So it's going to be a tough road in MLS. I think the team has much more of an opportunity, just do the simple mathematics. They've got a 2-game series now against Vancouver, away and at home, next Wednesday, to secure qualification for the Champions League. Then they'll play a team, I think it might be Seattle, that they've got to play for qualification into the group stage, if I'm not mistaken. If they make the group stage, then of course they've got a chance of making it into the knockout stages, the way Real Salt Lake did last season, the team that TFC was matched up with in the same group. The chances of doing something in the Champions League, I think, are significantly higher than doing them in the league. I think the math is just pretty straightforward, and the path is set. TFC has the hammer, so to speak. They've got the home field in the second game, and they've got to go to Vancouver Wednesday, and they've got to try to find a way of either keeping the Whitecaps off the score sheet, finding a way to score on the road, finding a way to score in a stadium where they did score 2 previously, but they also conceded 4, or they've got to try to find a way of getting like a 0-0 or a 1-1 draw. If they do that, they're going to come home with the hammer and have a very good shot of advancing into the qualification stages of the Champions League. Vancouver played last night as well. They played in New England, so they've got a bit of a travel. They've got a bit of a tough travel road ahead of them as well. They lost again to the New England Revolution, a team that's, I think, a point or 2 ahead of TFC in the standings. They lost 1-0. They didn't score on the road. Vancouver's only MLS win this season was against TFC, and it's going to be really, really interesting to see what the dynamic, I should say, is in that game on Wednesday evening. I'll definitely be up late and up watching that one, and I'll be spending a lot of time this week on the blog focusing on Vancouver and what sort of threats specifically they actually pose to Toronto, and what sort of tactical approach Coach Vinter might take with his lineup and with his formation in order to try and break Vancouver down. One of the players dramatically missed yesterday as well, of course, was Alan Gordon. Again, that garbage man kind of striker role has been absent from TFC in the last few games. Thankfully, João Plata has picked up some of the slack, but I think it's kind of unfair to ask a 19-year-old to continue to play that sort of critical role when you need a guy like that back. And hopefully he's going to be able to be back on Wednesday. He's looking kind of 50-50 is what I'm being told by the club for the game on Wednesday in Vancouver. Hopefully, at the very least, he'll be back for the away game in Colorado on Saturday. So that's it. Pain in the rain. I hope everybody is dried off. I hope everybody's got their Sunday coffee. I'm going to go and watch some of the Sunday footy right now and watch some teams from England finish up their season. So you guys have a wonderful Sunday. And again, I'll have another video blog up on Wednesday after the first leg of the final for the 2011 edition of the Voyageurs Cup. Thanks again for watching, and you guys have a great day. Cheers.